Okay, assignment 7, 3 layers of depth. I've introduced the project. We saw some examples, professional examples of how this is used, how depth of focus is used, depth of field, to heighten moments. And then I asked you to sketch out a scenario using 3 to 5 different exposures. Let me clean this up a little. And so I did that. I went to my office where I have a lot of toys. I have a clock. I have all this stuff. I like to keep a pretty cluttered desk. Helps my brain work. All right. And in 3 to 5 exposures, I want you to play with selective focus using focus lock and aperture, maybe macro mode. And the only requirement is that you have at least one exposure that shows 3 layers of depth, 3 distinct layers of depth, which means that the foreground is out of focus, the middle ground is in focus, and the background is out of focus. And we went over that and we played with our hands and stuff to figure out what that means in an image. And it's a great quality that's pretty unique to photography and film. It's very hard to reproduce that in painting or drawing in a way that looks believable. But we also have more than just the one shot to kind of tell our story. We have a sequence. So here, in my first panel, I decided I wanted to set up a little story of 2 robots, these 2 toys I have. One that looks really menacing and is really sharp-edged. And so the first panel, I wanted to introduce the viewer to that first robot character. And so I have them coming in from the corner, and they are in focus. This is what I conceived, okay? And in the background, you maybe see a little shadow of something, or you see some blurriness, like a lot of blurry stuff, because the middle ground and the background is out of focus. So how many layers of depth is this? Foreground's in focus, background's out of focus. It's 2. In the next panel, I wanted to introduce the next character, right? So I've introduced character 1 here. Here I introduce character 2, this other robot. And so this foreground robot that we've already been introduced to is now going to be out of focus in the foreground. So we kind of see how he's positioned, and he's looming in front of, kind of threatening this second character. But then you also get to see little glimpses of all the stuff around this other character. And I want it to look exciting and have lots of visual focal points in there. Colorful, lots of edges. So the foreground's out of focus. The middle ground is in focus, including this clock. And then the background behind the other robot pulling away is out of focus. So how many layers of depth is that? It's 3. Because all you can do with your camera is either have something in focus or out of focus. But if you sandwich focus in between 2 areas of out of focus, then you get 3 distinct layers. It's like a sandwich can only be filling and bread. But if you put bread on both sides of the filling, you have a sandwich. So I've introduced this character. I've introduced the second character. I've given you a little taste of what the scene is. But I've done what's called delayed the establishing. I haven't shown you clearly how much space is between them, what's going on, but I've built up a lot of tension between them in these first 2. So in my last shot, I'm going to pull away and kind of reveal that it's just my desk. And they're just toys, and there's nothing dramatic about it, right? They're not going to move, they're not going to fire missiles, there's not going to be any metamorphosis into a hyper state of being that happens. And so I basically want everything in focus. But maybe just to make it a little bit more interesting and not too flat, I'll pull focus away gently as I go into the background. But basically this is 1 layer of depth. Nothing is distinguishing itself. In really traditional storytelling, you would start with that. You'd start, and maybe I'll change it around, you know. but you start with the desk with all the stuff on it, and then you zero in on certain elements you want us to pay attention to. So I just flipped that around. Those are my sketches. And I did these sketches with the knowledge of what the frame of my camera is and looking at my desk and seeing what was there. And your sketches don't need to be well drawn to be effective because you know what you're trying to do. So then, using the sketches as reference, I got my exposures. And the reason I sketch before I shoot is because the sketches give me something to aim for. They make me work harder to get the shot that I intended, that I envisioned. Remember, this is a fine art photography class. It has a lot to do with being able to envision what you want. So here is my first sketch. I wanted this robot in sharp focus, the background to be blurry. And I got this shot and the focus worked out well, but I didn't really like how the lighting didn't separate the foreground from the background very much, and that was hard to change. But I could play with the composition a little bit. So I tried composing it a little bit differently, and my focus got a tiny bit soft. And then I tried experimenting with holding my hand up with my flash and using the flash. You know, this first shot is very similar to this shot, except this is my hand covering a lot of the flash so that the foreground really separates from the out of focus background, but it's a little too dark. So I tried a lot of variations of that. I like this one quite a bit. This one meets the intentions of my sketch almost perfectly. You see the hand there. You see the sharp edge of this, and you're really not sure what else is going on. I used macro mode to force my aperture really open, and I played with how close I was holding my camera to this action and how much I zoomed in order to frame it almost exactly like I sketched it. The clock fits in a different way, and I actually like how the clock fits in the corner here better than looking like a moon or something. So I like this one. Let me pull that over. And I just kept on trying to make it better and better. I was upset with this one because the claw was also out of focus. My focal depth was too narrow, so I opened it up a little bit. And I have the claw now more in focus. I like that one. A little bit better lighting of the same thing here. So actually I don't want this one. This one's the better example. And then I tried to get more extreme focus pull and show a little bit more of this robot. And then more dramatic lighting. This one's actually pretty cool. And you're going to have some failures. So here's me playing with lighting and just not working out. And then that one might be the best one I got. So I'll see. So I have a sequence of 4 I might choose from, just for that first panel. So it takes a lot of work, just like photojournalists have to shoot the same scene lots of different ways with subtlety. So before I move on to the next sequence, let me choose from these 4. Which one has the most potential? I like the lighting and the coloring here, but I don't love how the claw is also out of focus. And I don't know that you would read this as a robot. So that's tough. This one I feel like the colors are all too bright. And so even though the focus is really good, yeah, I don't know. This one I like the skewed angle. It's a little bit more dynamic. Then this one I really framed in on the robot. And I think this is probably the one I'm going to go with. Because everything's nice and sharp on the robot. And that background's a lot more vague. You might not even kind of see this as a robot in the background yet. So I'm going to say that's the one I want. So I'm going to mark that. Maybe I'll use purple. Okay, but I've got these other ones. It's really between that and this one. And it's just because I like the bluish lighting, so that's more about processing, because coloring's easy to work with. So I've got a lot of good exposure potential there. Okay, the next shot. This was the one that's required, the 3 layers of depth. Right, so this takes careful use of focus lock, of manual focus, of lighting. And this one I liked. I'm looking past this robot, focusing in on the second robot, and the background's starting to pull away in focus, but then I did the whole covering my flash thing, and I ended up blocking out most of that background, so I don't get that depth of focus I wanted. Here I do get that depth of focus a little bit. You see how it's starting to pull away? Here you can see my hand a little bit affecting the flash. And then this, I think, is the one that worked out the best. So everything in the middle ground is in sharp focus. It pulls away pretty dramatically behind it. And the foreground is obviously quite out of focus. We're looking past it, but hopefully you still recognize it from the first frame as the robot. Bring that one over. And that's the last shot I got, just a little bit brighter. But I think I like the one I brought over. Oh, there's more still. Then I just framed its composition a little differently. Yeah, that has some potential too. Okay, so now between these two, which frame has the most storytelling potential? This one? Or this one? I think I like this one because I see more of the clock. I think the focus is just maybe handled a little bit better. So I'm going to go with that, 488. It's kind of nice, it's gratifying to see that my last exposure of each sequence is the one I want to keep, because that's the one I shot, I looked at it, I checked it, I zoomed in on my screen on my camera, I said, yeah, that's it. Then I framed the next shot. So glad it's working out. Okay. Now the last is just simple. Just everything's pretty much in focus, just showing that it's just my desk. That my desk is very messy. Playing with how I frame it, where I focus, what my aperture is, and trying to keep the lighting somewhat dynamic. I actually used flash a lot in here because my office has like just fluorescent lights otherwise. This one's pretty good. 491. And this one actually, I think, is the one I want to use. That has my shadow in it, which I thought was distracting. So this one, this robot, you're see it from head to toe. I'll compare them here. So I have to choose between these two for my last shot. So in both of them, you see the robot from head to toe. It's nice and in focus. You see the clock, you kind of see the setting. You start to lose a little focus as it pulls away, just so it doesn't feel too flat. And you see there's nothing really heroic or scary about it. Yeah, and I think it's going to be 497 is the more effective shot. Yet again, the last in my sequence. Okay, now what I'm going to do is once I have my sketches, and I have that saved to the desktop. It's right here. I'm also going to save all of my best exposures. This is like a shoot for a cover.